Hi theory students. Today we're beginning the chapter on phrase structure and motivic analysis. In this first part we'll look at the relationship between phrases and harmony, and we'll also look at subphrases and motives. For the first example, and this comes from your textbook, the song from Music Man, Till There Was You. Listen to this and we'll come back and discuss it. Okay, notice that in the first 8 measures, although there seems to be a natural pause in measure 4, that's over here, it doesn't really end the phrase because we don't end either with a half or an authentic cadence or any of the other cadences that we know of. In other words, the melody and the chord is not a tonic or a dominant. And here we finally get a 5 chord at the end of the phrase, and that 5 chord makes for a half cadence. Similarly, in the second phrase, and that same chord that we had before, and now with the 1 chord here and the 5 chord here, perfect authentic cadence. So the point to this is that even though there was a natural pause over here in measure 4 of the second phrase, and over here in measure 4 of the first phrase, those aren't the ends of phrases, but rather those are things that we call a subphrase. That's one word, subphrase, and that indicates it's a natural pausing point in the phrase, but it's not the end of the phrase. So the phrases are defined as much by the harmonies as by where things pause. That's an important point. If I wanted to show how this works, then I could make a sketch measures 1 through 8 and 9 through 16. That's phrase 1 with a half cadence, and that's phrase 2 with an authentic cadence. And furthermore, both phrases begin the same way, but they end differently. So there's a labeling system that we can use. I could use little letter A, meaning the idea, melodic idea that starts it. We give that label. And the next phrase starts in a similar way and does something slightly different. So I could call this A prime. If it had a contrasting or entirely different melody to it or a different theme, then I could use the letter B. If another theme comes in, letter C, etc. We'll be talking more about how to diagram these. Let's go on to talk about motives. A motive is the smallest recognizable musical idea, and motives are defined by their pitches, their contours, and their rhythms. A musical idea becomes a motive through repetition, either exact or varied. Let's take this melody, Till There Was You, and we'll illustrate what we mean by that. If we go back to the tune, here's the motive, these three notes. It gets repeated, and it gets repeated with an extension. So you see the idea. It has pitches, in this particular case, G, A flat, B flat. It has contour, 3 notes in a row going up. It has rhythm, 2 eighth notes pick up, going to an accented note. So that every time we hear that kind of movement, we hear this musical idea coming back again. Even the pickup to the second half, they're on different pitches, E flat, F, A flat. It's a variant of that opening motive. There's also another musical idea here, the triplet motive that we hear in measure 5. The general contour of this quarter note triplet resolving down is answered with a quarter note triplet going up. So that would be our second musical idea or musical motive. Here are the ways that a motive can be varied. We talked about pitch, contour, and rhythm. The pitch can be exactly as we heard the motive initially, or we can have some approximate version of it with transposition. The contour, we can keep the same contour, or we can turn it upside down, inverting the shape of it, or we can alter some notes to change the contour. For the rhythm, we can shrink or expand the note values. When we shrink the note values, for instance, if I did you hear those notes coming faster, that's shrinking the values. Or that's expanding the note values. Those are called respectively diminution or augmentation. Or I could embellish the basic motive. Here are some examples. Let me take that basic motive and show you how I could work a whole phrase out of variants. Etc. Here's a motive. I'm transposing it. Now I'm inverting it, turning it upside down. Now I get another transposed version and another inversion. And now I take the original 3 notes and I make the first 2 longer, augmenting the idea. Continuing on, etc. I'm diminishing rhythmically the upside down or inverted version. And now I'm embellishing. It's still the same idea, but with a few extra notes put in as embellishments. Notice here I'm embellishing this part of it. Here I'm embellishing that part of it. And those are the ways that motives get varied. Variation of motives is what keeps pieces from being coherent. We understand the ideas, but not monotonous, where things get repeated exactly forever and ever. One more idea for this video cast, and that's something called sentence structure. In a phrase, we say that it exhibits sentence structure if in an 8-measure phrase the motive is heard for 2 measures, usually a variant of the motive for another 2 measures, and then 4 measures that form some kind of contrast that may start with the motive but go off in a different direction. Or if the phrase is 4 measures long, reduce that to 1 measure of the same motive, and then 2 measures contrasting. In the first subphrase, that is to say this part, the motive is stated and restated, and in the closing, this part, that part, it usually starts with some part of the motive and then goes differently, leading to the cadence. Here's an example that we saw from a previous chapter. From this Beethoven sonatina, so from that, here's the motive, and now it's heard a bit higher, at least in the bottom parts, while the F stays the same. So 2 measures, that's our motive. 2 measures, a variant of our motive. And now if you're wondering about these 4 measures, it starts with the same rhythm that our motive had here, but quickly goes off. Off in a different direction. So that's our sentence structure. In this particular case, 2 measures, plus another 2 measures, plus 4 measures, of which the first 2 share the same motive, and then these 4 go off in a contrast. We call such a thing a sentence structure, and it's not a requirement for a melody, but it's something that's fairly common. That's the video cast for today, to be continued.